Well, here we go. I just spent the last hour and a half setting up Mr. President, and they were not kidding. I was like, whenever games are like, this requires a lot of table space, I'm always like, yeah, that's going to be fine. Well, as you can see, we've got the leaf out on the dining room extension, and this game takes up the entire thing. Between the 7 random chit cups, the main board with the state of the world and domestic affairs, with the sideboard of conflict and other powers, and with the war and I guess terror, rogue state holding box stuff, the game is massive. I can already tell that manipulating the game is going to be a challenge. Like, I've already had trouble figuring out where the different tracks were. I drew my opening game event cards, cascading events to start the game, to finish setup, and there are all these references to tracks, and I'm like, where the heck is that? And I'm standing here looking over the board. There are so many tracks, it's going to take some time to get familiar with the layout of the game. That's the biggest impediment so far to trying to figure out what to do. The game talks about different counters and different tracks, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where they are, so you've got to go hunting. And I wish there was like a pictorial diagram. There is a counter manifest of all the different counters, but it's not very useful because there's only one example of each counter. And there's definitely not a diagram that tells you where all the stuff is. So that could have been improved in terms of just getting you familiar with what you're looking at. But the game does make me want to buy a giant Resolute desk to have my own Oval Office. Ridiculous number of chart booklets that I'm excited to dig into. We've set up the state of affairs for sort of the sandbox scenario. It is pretty nice when you look at the state of the world. You can tell exactly what's going on in any individual area. So, for example, if we look at Central and South Asia, we can see that there is a war in progress with a rogue state. That's the Taliban in the U.S. We've got some random U.S. military footprints. We've got some tensions with India. We've got Russia and China playing some political games. We've got some terror groups in an unstable state in that part of the world, plus U.S. forces deployed to that part of the world, plus potential crises that are going to come up, and the alignment and stability of this part of the world combined with whether they are pro or anti-U.S. So every region's going to have that kind of, that level of sort of detail around what's going on. The Middle East, as you can tell, a lot going on there. We've got the turn sequence down here, but we're going to use the flip book for our first playthrough. I just wanted to get a sense of what the game plays like because it's been sitting on my table and I haven't had it punched. I still don't actually have it all punched. I've been punching counters as I need them, but there's a bunch of counters that I don't know what they do. I finished setting up the decks. Let's just bring you into sort of what's happened. So I've just been elected. Me and my vice president here, Raul Sanchez, who's a pretty terrible vice president. Don't know why I picked him on the campaign trail. We've got our cabinet here. We've got Andy Lewis of GMT as our chief of staff, the good Andy Lewis, I should point out. We've got Krista Halston as our Secretary of State, also pretty good. And then my draw for Secretary of Defense was not great. I didn't get anyone with military power. So we've got Kim Richards as the Secretary of Defense. We'll see how that goes. Me as the president, I am a moderate influence and I am a team builder. So these are some of the special abilities that I have. And then at the beginning of the game, I also have an outstanding Homeland Security chief. I haven't really looked at what this card does. It says he is a patriot and an inspirational leader who is consumed with protecting the U.S. against all enemies. Because of his skills and experience, I get these benefits each turn. So that's cool. At the start of each turn, I can decrease one terror group in the continental U.S. by 1. We don't have any terror groups right now in the continental U.S. And at the start of turns 2 and 4, I can improve Homeland Security by 1 box. I think that's this track down here. So we can improve Homeland Security. So that's just some of the little RPG elements that you get to start the game. It's pretty fun. I really like that. Then we've got what the public wants me to accomplish. So they want Social Security reformed ASAP. They want immigration reform ASAP. They want legislation around privacy. And then they want to expand NASA funding, and they want some welfare reform in the bottom. Then I had to choose my particular priorities based on what I want to accomplish. And one is random, which is my campaign promise, which was doing some cybersecurity overhauls for the U.S. That's probably pretty appropriate. Make sure that our elections and stuff are secure. And then I had to choose my 3 priorities. So I said, hey, listen, the public wants Social Security reform. I want Social Security reform. Let's keep it solvent. We've got the and then I decided to say, hey, you know what? NASA funding. I'm a big science and astronomy person. Let's make that our number 2 priority, and then number 3, immigration reform, because the public wants that as well. So I tried to match these with what the public wants, hoping that will give me an easy path forward. What else do I need to tell you about what's happened so far during the setup? We did draw our opening events, our opening cascading events. So unfortunately, the worst thing that happened, we got a domestic crisis. That increased the domestic crisis thing here. Not very very good. We got Iran making some improvements on their nuclear capabilities. That triggered, in the Middle East, a regional crisis, which was on 3, and it went to a major crisis, unfortunately, so I had to roll that up. That major crisis ended up putting a terror marker in Europe. The destabilization of Iran's geopolitical power, I guess, contributing to the rise of potentially pro-Iranian groups in Europe, maybe. Don't know. It's kind of up to you to fill in those gaps. It's kind of interesting, the cause and effect there. So we do these C parts because we're at the beginning of the game. The other one I drew here was apparently some sort of investigation domestically. So I had a choice. I could either be a partisan or appoint an independent counsel. Given the fact that I didn't want domestic crisis to go up again this turn, I chose not to be a partisan and improve my party relationship, and instead I appointed an independent counsel. Now, that had some knock-on effects with some other things that happened, so I had some random events occur from there. We had some cabinet drama, and I got some treasury scandal that started worsening the economy, as you can see down here to start the game. Not a great start. And then thankfully, I did avoid a long-term crisis, so I got to discard this card from the game. It won't come back, I don't believe. So that's where we stand. Those are my priorities. That's what I'm going to try and accomplish as president. I should probably take a look at what the auto lose conditions are. They are over here somewhere. So if Russian influence gets to 9 or Chinese influence gets to 15, I believe they will win. The Russian one, there's some other conditions that have to apply. There are some other auto lose conditions that I am not quite sure at. I believe if war breaks out on either, so if war happens and it's between Russia and NATO or China and Japan, that's an auto lose. And then there's some conditional loss here. And so, I should probably look at what the auto win and auto lose is. But so far, very intimidating, and I'm excited to get through. We're going to try and play through at least the first year of my presidency just to get a handle on how the game plays, and I'll kind of loop you in to show you the narrative that's unfolding as we go. Okay, so playing another hour and a half here, and I'll try and encapsulate what's happened. But we were here at the beginning of the game from the last section of the video, came down, skipped some of these, did some of these. By far, the action sequences take the longest. We did the Russia-China Acts phase. We had China Act. There's a whole huge AI booklet in here. Oops, that's Russia. Here's China. I have the China one over here somewhere. Anyways, can't find it right now. There's a China booklet, I promise you. Oh, here it is. A whole huge China booklet that takes them through their AI and what they're trying to do. They essentially try and quell domestic threats that are in their local region, and then they try and expand outward. And there's some randomness to what they do. Dice that they roll, influence that they add. I actually need to go back and count up the total influence that they have right now. But they try and place influence in their global area. They try and build Belt and Road. They try and leverage South America or Central America for oil. You can see they got some influence down here in South America on this turn. And generally, keeping on top of China is going to be really important. Understanding how that AI works and what they will prioritize as far as their actions go, defensively versus aggressively, is key to being good at this game. And I'm still trying to come to terms with it and get my head around it. And right now, having just done the China phase and seeing all the things that they've done, I'm debating whether or not I want to do a cyber attack on China, which can provide really, really good dividends, but can also escalate the relationship with them in a way that's pretty negative. So it's really a risk reward, not sure. The other option is I can do a state visit to China and potentially diffuse the situation there, or I can just try and remove Chinese influence from the board. So there's a lot of really interesting choices. One of the things I have done already after China acted, they did a cyber attack on Korea and Japan. So you can see here that there is some tension now in South Korea, and Japan there was tension, and they'd actually degraded my alliance with Japan. But I just did a state visit. I hosted the Japanese Prime Minister, and that I did very well with that. And so I upped my alliance status with Japan, and I was able to remove that tension. So responding to what China did. Some of the other stuff that's gone on, it's really interesting. It's kind of an emergent narrative generator of stuff that's going on. I did successfully track a terror group in the Middle East. We've got my intel advisor and my focused intel collection capabilities going in the Middle East. We want to try and get rid of some of these terror groups. If we can, we want to add more terror groups to Central and South Asia, because that will affect China's AI, and they will want to make China try and stop those terror groups and waste precious actions on securing sort of their western flank. So pretty interesting there, kind of like a get inside the mind of your enemy, like thing here, like so that you act geopolitically, which is really, really interesting. What else happened? We did improve our cabinet, so our cabinet effectiveness is going to go up at some point this turn. We took a lot of actions. We quelled some domestic crises in the U.S., so we've gotten this down to 0, which is great. We want to get our lingering domestic crisis track up to 0 if we can. Bad things start to happen. Obviously, you lose the game if it gets too high. But I just can't spare the actions right now. After seeing what China did, I'm trying to get on top of their movements around the world, and I'm kind of ignoring the domestic. We also assigned DARPA here to increase our cyber warfare capabilities after China increase some of their abilities here in the strategic recon and intel gathering area, I believe. One of these China increased, but you want to stay ahead of your opponents as much as possible, because if they get ahead of you, then they start getting really good die roll modifiers when it comes time for them to act. The other thing I'm potentially thinking about, one of China's things that they did is they saw that I was in a war here in Central Asia with the Taliban, and they increased the attack power of ISIS. You can see here's my war with ISIS. So we've got some UN regional troops, but they increased the strength and forces of ISIS kind of on the down low against me. So when we get to the war phase, it's going to be harder for me to win that war. So now what I'm considering doing is maybe taking some of these forces. I have one action left. I'm not sure what I want to do with that. Considering taking some of these forces and moving them to the Central and South Asia just to potentially beef up the conflict that's going to happen there. So weighing cyber attack on China, weighing a more diplomatic approach, we're weighing potentially staffing up the military in that part of the world. Lots of interesting meaty choices, lots of inflection points for those choices as well. So the way that the game works is you take some actions and then the game kind of reacts, and then you react to that. And then you draw some crisis chits, and some bad things happen, and you keep going. And this is a whole turn, right? So it's a long time. I've been playing an hour and a half, and I've only gotten to here, and now I'm agonizing over choices. So I just want to give you that kind of brief overview of like what it's like to play and some of the decisions you're looking at. Most of it's been focused on the world stage so far. I haven't really done anything domestically. We'll see what happens when we get to some of the legislative priorities and how that works. Not really sure how that's going to go. I've stayed away mostly from trying to deal with that right now, other than trying to increase my cabinet effectiveness. The higher this goes, the more actions I get, and the easier it will be to accomplish some things. Woo, here we are. Okay, I've got several more hours of the game under my belt. Like I said, the thing that's taking the longest is really deciding what to do with my actions. There's a lot of coin inspiration going on in this game, so you've got these menus of actions, of different types of actions. So presidential master actions, military master actions, diplomatic master actions, and these are double-sided, right? So there's 6 to 8 master actions you're taking, and the game is broken up in stuff that happens and then actions that you can take, right? So I just did any four diplomatic and or military actions. After seeing what the game has done, then I go and I have to look at the board, and I really have to think, like, what do I want to accomplish? What do I have the latitude to accomplish? Just really interesting, like, inflection points about how you deal with what's going on. And it is very overwhelming to see what is happening. And in that way, I think it gives a really good simulation of what being the president of the United States must be, because you're so invested in everything that's happening abroad, everything that's happening at home. You cannot possibly whack all the moles. It is just impossible. But I'll try and give you a recap of what I did since the last time you saw. So we drew some crises. I actually got a couple of pretty good events. I got a ceasefire. We negotiated a ceasefire to a civil war in the Middle East where they had started cropping up. And then I got that allowed me to put some UN peacekeepers here on this ceasefire. We also got a papal visit, and that just was generally good across the board, increased my media relations and my relationship with Congress. My approval rating is now up to 58%, which is great. I believe it starts here at 40. So we've increased this quite a bit, and that's only going to help me as the game goes along. There are bonuses if you can get it above 60, so I just need to raise it a couple more. That'll be very useful. We've got 11 action points remaining. There have been options to spend those for certain things. I've been saving them because obviously, as you can see, the activation phases, I've got to save them for the rest of the turn, so I want to make sure I still have them. A lot of the time they're used for die roll modifiers. Haven't earned any legacy points yet. I thought about taking an action that might earn me a legacy point, but I've been rolling pretty good. So some of the stuff that's happened. So in my last action sequence, well, first of all, before I get to that, we did some domestic action. So I did raise my media relations after that had naturally decayed. If you don't tend to the media, they tend to decay, and I think that's really funny. So I managed to raise it back up to where it was. We also got the chance to do the legislative segment, which I hadn't done yet. This is where bills get sent to Congress to see whether or not they're going to be passed. And so based on who controls Congress, right now we have split party control, and based on how many enemies in Congress, how many friends you have in Congress, that determines kind of what bills go in there. They picked one, I picked one. They picked the Social Security bill. Obviously they do that because the public wants Social Security reform. I actually want it as well, so I'm perfectly happy with them to put that into Congress. And then I chose increased NASA funding because that's something that I find is very high on my list, and the public kind of wants it as well. So when we get to the next legislative phase, we'll see how those bills go. We also added a new enemy to Congress, this radical Dora Nieto. Now, she's not very powerful. She's only got a 1 there. But the radicals in the opposing party here, 4 points versus my friendlies of 2. So we have kept bipartisan cooperation pretty good. So congressional bipartisan cooperation's at 2. That's great. That allows us to put 2 bills in every legislative phase. What else has been going on domestically? That's about the main thing. I did add some more DARPA research here to naval forces. I want to get ahead of China in the naval race, and I want to get ahead of both China and Russia in cyber warfare. I feel like is what I would like to do. We did have some additional strength points added in the war for against ISIS. We are going to be resolving that fairly soon. I believe if we come down here, with the war progress next activation phase. Near the end, we're going to do that. This should be here. So you can see that I have the China Summit used card there. So with my 4 diplomatic or military actions at the end of the turn, I did do a airstrike against a terror group in the Middle East. We actually rolled really well on that. We actually killed their leader, degraded the terror group 1 level, and sent them back here to the gathering box. We've dispersed that terror group in the Middle East, which is great. A lot of progress in the Middle East this turn. We've ended some civil wars, destroyed some terrorists. The only downside is that there's a rogue state that popped up here. And China and Russia still have influence. So this is really a hot zone right now. I'm trying to raise the stability of the Middle East, but we are trending in a pro-U.S. direction, which is great. My allies got to take some action. So Israel did some counterterrorism actions. Australia did some actions as well. I believe they removed some influence, or they lowered regional crisis. I can't remember exactly what they did. And then India took an action, and all they did was remove the tension that was building up there. So it's pretty cool. Each of the different powers. So whenever you get to one of these ally rogue group acts, you randomly choose one of these chits, and there's a different group of countries on them, and then they all act over the course of a turn, and different groups of countries do different things, and based on how close of an ally they are with you, they have different options of things that they can do. So it gives each little unique nation its own little characteristics, which is great. So Israel's really good at counterterrorism, for example. Australia is really good at coalition building. There's just some really cool flavor coming through with some of the procedural stuff that happens in the game. I tend to not like procedurally heavy games, especially solo games, but this one is providing a really nice emergent storytelling engine for kind of modern geopolitics, which is cool. The other thing we did with our actions is we held a China Summit. That's this counter here. And so this was a really interesting. I wanted to check out this particular aspect of the game. So basically what happens is you look at this summit table. So what we've decided to do a global summit with China. Depending on how good our relationship is with them, we get to do up to 3 potential topics at the summit. And those things can be like improving your relations with China, improving your trade, jointly mediating a civil war ceasefire. You can do a joint anti-terror campaign, containing rogue states, trying to contain North Korea. And what's really interesting is you pick your issue that you want to discuss with them, and then you roll a D10, and that will determine whether or not China demands something or not. And some of the things that sort of like represent stuff in your best interest, but it's not in their best interest, like for example, containing North Korea, has increasingly more expensive costs for China to go along with what you want. So after you roll, you see what China wants, and then you decide whether or not you are going to successfully conclude talks with them. If you do, you get something, and then China will get something based on what you rolled. And if you don't, that just counts as one of the issues that you didn't jointly work with them on. And then when you flip this over to the back, you see how well the summit went. And so based on the percentage of issues that you successfully resolved with them, you'll then roll on this table and everyone gets something good from it, right? So it's really interesting because, obviously I'm trying to contain China right now because I see them as an adversary, but there are opportunities to work with them cooperatively for mutual benefit. And there's this really interesting tension of like, do I get really aggressive with them and go after them, or do I try and work with them collaboratively and make them more powerful? So you can see here that what I've basically traded is I've improved China's economy to peak performance, which is not good in the sense that they're going to get a lot of actions when they get to go again. And they've also gotten an additional action marker as part of my of the summit. They got this for one of the issues we were trying to tackle. So I got something, but they got something. But I also did get a pro-US trending relationship with them. And so if we can get that to friends and partners, I feel like we can affect the rest of the global stage in a more productive way, even if they are my rival. So this part of the game has been super fascinating to me. And I think the modeling of the behavior and the incentives for how you interact with your rivals is unlike anything else I've ever seen. It captures like the nuance of like geopolitics in a way that I very rarely see tabletop games do. And in that way, this is by far my favorite part of the experience so far, is like assessing how I want to go about working with China and my rivals and so forth. So that's it for activation phase 1. That's a quarter of my first year. We're going to try and get through to the end. I'm probably not going to come back unless something really crazy happens or interesting, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what that looks like playing through the first activation phase. It was essentially 3 months of real-time activity here in the first turn. This is a beast of a game, and I'm very impressed with the design. It is, this could never spring fully formed from my mind as a game design, and so the fact that Gene has done this is absolutely amazing. If you get a chance to play this, highly recommend it. It would actually be really fun. The one thing I really want to do is I want to play it cooperatively with 4 players, or 5 players even. So one of you is the president, and then each player takes one of your cabinet members. And so when it comes time to make decisions, each player is working from the perspective of their particular cabinet member, and they're looking at the potential actions they can take, and they're in charge of sort of, the diplomatic, the Secretary of State. They're responsible for the global world stage, and the Chief of Staff is responsible for domestic affairs, and they get to choose the actions they take. And I think it would be a really fun group role-playing experience, so I can't wait to try that with some friends, maybe just keep it going or at a convention for a long time. Just really impressed so far, despite the fiddliness and despite the sort of like navigational problems I'm having with like finding all the relative tracks. This is a super cool, super unique gaming experience. Finished year 1 as the President of the United States of America. Stuff goes to hell in a handbasket real fast in this game, especially at the end of the turn. Wow, unforgiving if you don't stay on top of the international arena. Let's take a look. We'll go across the board, and I'll show you everything that's gone on. So we had a couple of wars in the first year between Israel and Hezbollah that were provoked by Iran. Israel won both of them, which was nice, helped our public approval. We're still at war with the Taliban, although we are approaching a victory. They've not been doing well. Even though they've been propped up a little bit by Russia. So we get one more victory there, we'll win that war. We did have a war break out at the very end of last turn. DPRK invaded the Republic of Korea. Was surprised. Fortunately, that first battle did not go well, so Republic of Korea is winning. That's good. We want that. One of the key ways to lose the game is if they're at war and North Korea gets nukes. Speaking of Iran, we've knocked them back down to 3. Republic of Korea managed to increase to 3. So not ideal, but not the end of the world. We're still a little bit further away from losing the game from that. Strategic capabilities, we're keeping ahead in general military. Russia managed to race out ahead in cyber warfare. Their cyber capabilities last turn really destroyed my relationship with Congress. We're ahead in space, we're ahead in strategic missiles, and we are ahead in strategic recon intel gathering. So cyber warfare is arguably the most important track, but the fact that we're leading in all the rest of these is very good. What else do we got? We have more opponents in Congress. We only have one friend. The congressional relationship has really suffered. It's really gridlocked my domestic agenda, which is unfortunate. We do have some bills in the hopper here. We passed one bill last turn. It was an opponent bill, and I believe that was Social Security reform. I'm still trying to get cybersecurity passed as my campaign promise. I'm still trying to get NASA funding, but Homeland Security and NASA funding they've got opposition in Congress. And then down here, so world opinion of the U.S. went up by, which is great, which I didn't expect. Relations with Congress has been just absolutely hammered. You remember we were up here. We're at 3. We're actually down to adversarial at one point last turn. Not good. Media relations. The media loves us. We're very good at getting the media on our side, which is quite nice. And then Homeland Security, obviously, with our Homeland Security chief special capability we drew at the beginning of the game. Quite good there. The economy still in the same space it was at the start of the game. We managed to prevent it from going down, which is great for everything that we're trying to do. This is actually a really important track. The economic assistance stuff is very helpful. Cabinet effectiveness, Our party relations is terrible. So like the president is being estranged by his allies or by his own party and the opposition party in Congress. This has got to be fixed immediately. We missed out on having a friend in Congress, which I badly need. I failed every role to kick out my enemies in Congress, unfortunately. At the start of the next turn, I just did some of the beginning of turn stuff to see how it works. I reordered my priorities. We do have tensions in the cabinet now, in the cabinet focus, so that's something this turn that we're going to have to spend actions working on. I changed my improved relations with Congress to focus number 1 because that has to be fixed. We have a new Secretary of Defense, Ivan Mercer, who actually has a military value. So we went through 2 Secretaries of Defense in that first year. And then the public priorities and what they want has shuffled up quite a bit. Education reform got added. Homeland security got added. NASA funding is it hit the back burner. So we tried to reallocate our priorities to what the people want there. And then the world. Wow, it is chaos. We are doing really good at home. Europe, we're doing okay. The economy there is recovering. Eastern Europe, we do have some terror cells, and Russia got some influence in there, but all in all, not too bad. Our sanctions on Russia that we slapped down after their cyber attacks actually forced them into posture 1, which is the less aggressive posture, which is great for this coming turn. They still hate us, but the sanctions did work, which is cool. Central America, their stability and alignment have suffered. More terror groups there. We did take out a terror cell in Central America during the last turn, but as you can see, it's destabilizing quickly. South America also destabilizing a bit and trending down against us. The Middle East continues to be an absolute shit show. It is very difficult. A couple wars, like I said, between Hezbollah and Israel. Regional stability is at the lowest it can possibly be. We've got to fix that this turn. Thankfully, they are trending pro-U.S., so that might help. We've got a level 3 terror group here that we're trying to get intel on. Africa, this is probably the one area of the world we did the best in. There are a lot of terror groups in there, but the regional alignment and the stability is quite high. We did manage to remove some Chinese influence and keep the crises low. So Africa's doing pretty well. What else do we got? Central and South Asia. We've kind of let this one go. Has been a hot zone all game long. You can see the number of terror groups, a level 3 in there. The influence from China and Russia. Tensions with India. We've lost our relationship with them. 4 unstable states plus a rogue state here, and still fighting the ISIS there as well. Regional stability low. We've had several major crises. They keep popping up and keep moving up. It's been very bad in terms of the card draws that we've been getting. I don't know that there's anything to do about this. I think we just kind of have to let this one go. But we do need to figure out a way. What I'm hoping is Central and South Asia I'm hoping that when China and Russia go, they'll start to handle some of the terror groups and potentially some of the unstable states. So there is something in their behavior AI that does sort of take care of this region if there's a bunch of terror groups. So they're going to have to help with that one. China's still at posture 1. Relations with the U.S. are pretty good. Lots of tensions, though, and they still do have that action from the summit that we did with them when they activate. And then down here in Asia Pacific, we do have the war on now between DPRK and South Korea. And some terror groups there, although we are going to take out this level 2 terror group at some point this turn. But the alignment and stability is quite good. We've been keeping a lock there. I did surge some units into the Indian Ocean. We brought some Marines and another U.S. carrier in here. We want to project force Central and South Asia, Middle East, and Africa as much as possible to try and win this war quicker. And then we're going to have to go after this rogue state and this rogue state at some point, presumably, if I continued the game. So that's kind of a look at where we are. I've earned some prestige, or some legacy, public approval I've had up in the 64 to 70 range for most of the game, which is phenomenal. That would give me 10 legacy points at the end of the game, which would be huge. And then prestige is still sitting at 6. This should be in current turn 2. So that's where sort of Mr. President has come out. It's a really fascinating game, really unique. Some of the stuff that it's sort of going on here and how you tackle the challenges are really fun. There's a lot to dig into, a lot of meatiness. You could play this game quite a bit and have completely different things happen. So it's really awesome. I highly recommend you check it out. I appreciate you watching this sort of first impressions, first year playthrough of Mr. President sandbox scenario. I've got to break this down because I'm going out of town, but what I might do is take a picture of everything that we've got going along here and try and pick this up when I come back and reset up everything that we've got that would be some effort, but breaking it down will help me organize it. So hopefully when I set it up, it won't take so long. But yeah, if you've got Mr. President and you've played it, let me know what you think. If you've got questions about it, if you notice any mistakes that I've been making, let me know. I'm having a blast. I did get a chance to play it with some friends tonight. We did a little co-op. I split the cabinet up into domestic and foreign cabinet members, and so we shared our action points, and ultimately I had the final call on decisions, but we played cooperatively, and it was pretty fun. So looking forward to digging more into this when I get back from my trip. And I will see you then. Might see some more videos on this.